Supporting the Catholic vote, the Biden-Harris campaign reaches out to Catholics. What the campaign is telling EWTN News Nightly. Priestly ordinations. The Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, ordains dozens in a basilica in Rome. A new encyclical. We examine Pope Francis's third encyclical set to be signed next month. And aid for disasters. The U.S. Bishops' Conference plans to help Louisiana devastated by Hurricane Laura. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump says that he is willing to invest his own money in his campaign if that's what it takes to win re-election. That's because he says the stakes are too high.
We have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country. We have a radical left group going around. These people, there's something wrong with them. There really is. There's something wrong with them. And Joe doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the mental capability to control these people. And you take a look at what's going on.
The president spoke today before leaving on a trip to Florida and North Carolina. He praised the latest job numbers, promised a coronavirus vaccine would come soon, and criticized his Democratic opponent for being weak on law and order. With 56 days left to campaign, former Vice President Joe Biden, a Catholic who supports abortion, is vying to win the vote of faithful Catholics in America, even with a dedicated Catholics for Biden page on the campaign's website. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, that is the big question. Will Catholics support a president who supports abortion? I put that question to the Biden-Harris campaign today, and here's what they tell me. They say that they believe Catholics are multi-issue voters, but also voters who believe in Joe Biden's values, and they believe that his values are so strong that it would cause Catholic voters to overlook the fact that his policies do not protect the unborn.
We are making sure that we are showing people of faith in this campaign that they are valued and respected.
Joshua Dixon is the faith engagement director for the Biden-Harris campaign. He says Joe Biden is not concerned that his pro-abortion position will turn Catholics away.
Catholic voters are going to have a very clear choice in this election. The ways in which their values align with each ticket will be up to them to decide. But we really, really believe that Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have the agenda that aligns much more with the common good.
In 2012, then Vice President Biden campaigned to win the vote of Catholics for Barack Obama's re-election.
Go to Catholics.barackobama.com.
And President Obama won the Catholic vote 50% to Mitt Romney's 48%. But in the 2016 presidential election, a Pew Research poll reports President Trump won the votes of American Catholics 52% to Democratic challenger Hillary Clinton's 45%. To connect with this demographic, the Biden-Harris campaign is highlighting Joe Biden's Catholic faith. Last week, the campaign kicked off Catholics for Biden with a virtual event that included Sister Simone Campbell, who told Catholic news agency abortion is above her pay grade. Pope Francis said last year abortion is never okay and equated it to hiring a hitman. U.S. bishops reaffirmed the threat of abortion, saying, quote, "It remains our preeminent priority because it directly attacks life itself." And in a previous statement wrote, quote, "Every act of responsible citizenship is an exercise of significant individual power. We must exercise that power in ways that defend human life." Another issue we have to look at is religious liberty. In July, shortly after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor, Joe Biden said, quote, he was disappointed by the decision and promised to reinstate Obama-era policies that would require the sisters to ensure access to birth control, which is a violation of their religious beliefs. Tracy?
Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you so much, Eric. Well, as Eric just mentioned, Catholics across the country are poised to play a significant role in deciding who will win the presidential election on November 3rd. Self-identified Catholics make up 22% of national voters. For 9 out of the past 10 presidential elections, the majority of Catholics voted for the winner. Mercedes Schlapp, Senior Advisor for Strategic Communications for the 2020 Trump campaign, joins me now on Skype to talk about the president's outreach to Catholic voters. Mercedes, welcome back. Always good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, as we heard in Eric's package, the Biden campaign is making its pitch to Catholic voters, stating that Catholics across the board are multi-issue voters. What's your reaction to that message?
Well, I don't see how Biden-Harris ticket could in any way court Catholic voters, since they are the most anti-Catholic presidential ticket in our history. When you look at the fact that they're pro-abortion obsession, quite frankly, where they've received the endorsement of Planned Parenthood, where they have basically been big supporters of late-term abortions. They don't even support the pain-capable unborn act or banning abortion at 20 weeks. The list goes on and on, forcing contraception on the Little Sisters of the Poor. The mere fact that they've said that they would use a pro-abortion litmus test to pick their judges. Again, you look at their list of issues, and in no way does it connect with Catholic voters. And I think that it's very important for the Catholic community to be aware of how even Kamala went after the Knights of Columbus, basically pushing forward that they could be a sort of a dangerous group, and using that as a litmus test for disqualifying a person to be a judge.
Well, the Trump administration continues to highlight its pro-life record and lists protections for the unborn on its list of priorities for a second term in office. How do you think that's going to resonate with Catholic voters?
Well, I got to tell you, we have launched our Catholics for Trump coalition groups. We have been spending a lot of time talking about the president's pro-life record. As we know, he's been one of the most pro-life presidents in our lifetime. In addition to how he would push forward for strict constitutionalists in our judicial branch, he has quite the record in appointing very strong judges to the courts. And I think you see with the president that he's very focused on protecting religious liberties, not only here, but abroad. And that's something that the president has focused on, in addition to ensuring that those on college campuses are protected if they're praying or for any sort of freedom of speech when it comes to a religious issue. And I think making those steps shows how the president has been committed to the Catholic community in terms of ensuring our freedom to worship, also to ensure that we protect the most innocent among us, which is the unborn.
Mercedes, you touched on this, but let's talk a little bit more about what the Trump campaign sees as the keys to winning the Catholic vote.
Well, I mean, we talked about, obviously, the issue of religious liberties. This is something that, as we know, even during COVID, we've seen how the Democrat governors have cracked down on churches, forcing churches to close for a lengthy period of time while maybe a casino would be open instead. And for the president, his focus has been knowing that church is an essential service. It's why he believed we needed to open up our churches safely during the COVID pandemic. Secondly, he's been, and I remember being in the Oval Office with him when he signed the letter to Congress saying that he would only support pro-life legislation. This was something that was an important message sent to Congress because we know what's happened with the Democrats. They're no longer moderate on this issue at all of pro-life versus abortions. They've become so extreme in their party that you even take the governor of Virginia, Governor Northam, who has basically said that a baby can be born, you make it comfortable, and then you can basically kill the baby. And it's this lack of empathy, this lack of understanding that we have to have this moral obligation to defend our unborn, to ensure that if a baby, let's say, survives an abortion, that they should get the medical help needed. And this is something President Trump supports. Obviously, we know that the Democrats like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have made it clear that they do not support, if a baby survives an abortion, to keep that baby alive, to provide the medical care that they needed. It just shows you how extreme the Democrat Party and Joe Biden have become.
Well, Mercedes, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Mercedes Schlapp, Senior Advisor for Strategic Communications. Thanks again, Mercedes.
Thank you so much.
China and India are accusing each other of provoking tensions along their shared border in the Himalayan mountains. China's foreign ministry claims that India's army crossed the border and calls it a, quote, serious military provocation. India denies the accusations and says its soldiers fired warning shots after Chinese troops surrounded a border post. China's top coronavirus expert claims China has achieved a phased victory in fighting the pandemic. He was also awarded China's highest civilian award for his work in battling the disease. China still says it acted quickly and responsibly, but rejects calls for an independent investigation into its handling of the virus outbreak. The Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin ordained 29 deacons of Opus Dei to the priesthood on Saturday. The cardinal said to be a priest does not consist of a series of tasks, but is a way of life, not just to guide others, but to give one's life to others as Jesus Christ did. The Holy Father also sent a letter to congratulate the newly ordained priests and their families. The Vatican announces Pope Francis will sign a new encyclical on October 3rd in Assisi. The papal letter focuses on human fraternity and social friendship. This will be the Holy Father's third encyclical, and it is entitled Fratelli Tutti, which is Italian for all brothers. The last encyclical published was Laudato Si back in 2015. Joining me now is Andrea Galliaducci, Vatican analyst for EWTN News. Andrea, so good to see you. So tell us, why is Pope Francis publishing a new encyclical now?
Well, Pope Francis has been reflecting during these months of lockdown about how the world should be designed after the coronavirus crisis. And this is why he wrote a series of notes that turned to be an encyclical, and that's why he's going to publish it on October. October the 3rd is going to sign it. We don't know when it will be released, actually. Still, it's not announced. But, you know, all his reflections went into this encyclical that will likely outline the world after the coronavirus.
Andrea, can you talk a little bit more about the theme and why it was so important to Pope Francis?
Well, the encyclical will be called All Brothers, and it's about fraternity. We know that Pope Francis last year signed a declaration on human fraternity with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, that is a Sunni university, Muslim Sunni university in Egypt, and it's one of the main authorities for the Muslim world. And this declaration became very important to Pope Francis. He used that as the guideline of his diplomatic activity. He gave it as a gift to every head of state that went to meet the Pope. So this declaration became the guidelines of this encyclical too. And this is also one of the reasons why Pope Francis is going to Assisi to sign this new encyclical, because St. Francis is the saint of fraternity.
And can you talk just a little bit more about why the Holy Father chose Assisi?
Well, the Holy Father chose Assisi because, as I said, St. Francis is the saint of fraternity. He's going there on October the 3rd. That is actually the day when St. Francis died. St. Francis died on the evening of October the 3rd, so it's considered the 4th because it's the Vespers. He will celebrate a Mass, and it's important because everything will be, how can I say, like framed into a Franciscan idea, Franciscan word of fraternity. St. Francis was the saint of fraternity. St. Francis was the saint of the relation with nature, with the creation. All of these themes will be into the encyclical, as well as the themes of the economic. And St. Francis also developed a reflection on economics. Pope Francis will be in Assisi again, virtually, not in presence, for a great event that is called the Economy of Francesco in the end of November.
And Andrea, lastly, can you remind us once again of the significance of an encyclical?
Well, the encyclical is a letter that the popes address to the whole Christianity. So it's very important because it's not a letter just concerning one local church or one local problem, but it's something that is addressed to the whole church. We know it's a pastoral letter, but pastoral letters generally have a local impact. The encyclical is broader. And we might say that since John the 23rd, the encyclicals are not just addressed to the Christianity, but also to all the men of goodwill all over the world, all the men that want to follow what the church is saying.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Andrea Galliaducci, Vatican analyst for EWTN News. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Pope Francis pays tribute to a Polish cardinal who was a close friend of St. John Paul II. Cardinal Marian Jaworski passed away on Saturday. In a condolence telegram sent yesterday, the Holy Father noted his Episcopal motto, quote, "For me to live is Christ." The Pope said that motto accompanied Jaworski throughout his life and defined the way he lived. Coming up, U.S. bishops launch a national relief effort to bring desperately needed aid to people hit by Hurricane Laura. The president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has requested an emergency collection for those impacted by natural disasters. The announcement from Los Angeles Archbishop Jose Gomez follows the destruction caused by Hurricane Laura and continuing California wildfires. Correspondent Mark Irons reports now from the studio. Mark?
Tracy, this will be a voluntary special collection that bishops around the country can consider taking up to help in the humanitarian recovery effort. Archbishop Gomez says that thousands of homes, businesses, and churches have been severely damaged, and the impacts will be long-lasting. As the country struggles with a pandemic, people along the Gulf Coast and parts of California are facing an added burden: massive hurricane damage and ongoing wildfires.
Just keep going.
Over the holiday weekend, evacuations from a blazing Sierra National Forest. Some hikers say they barely made it out.
I think if we had stayed just 10 minutes more, we might not have been so lucky.
Now the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops calls on the country to help out. Money gathered through a national collection will fill the bishops' emergency disaster fund and support the efforts of Catholic charities and Catholic relief services as they and their local agencies respond to immediate emergency needs for such necessities as water, food, shelter, and medical care, and aid in long-term rebuilding and recovery efforts.
The needs are great.
Seattle Archbishop Paul Aitchen heads the U.S. Bishops' Conference National Collection Committee. After speaking with church officials in the disaster areas, he contacted the USCCB president, Archbishop Jose Gomez, and recommended the national relief effort. Heartbreaking was the word he used to describe some of the Gulf Coast devastation from Hurricane Laura.
There's no power, there's no potable water, and homes are destroyed.
And he says in California, raging wildfires forced church communities in the Diocese of Monterey to flee.
A number of parishes have had to evacuate. The Camaldolese Monastery had to evacuate. And some of these priests have not even been able to return yet to their rectories.
Archbishop Aitchen tells me he is aware that many are facing financial burdens right now because of the coronavirus. Still, that doesn't take away from the struggle that those facing these natural disasters feel at this time. As one example, he tells me that Lake Charles, Louisiana will probably face at a minimum 5 years to recover from Hurricane Laura. Tracy.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of the bishop-elect of Duluth, Minnesota. Michael Malloy was appointed to lead the diocese in June. He resigned after an accusation surfaced last month that he abused a minor in the 1980s. Malloy had been the administrator of the Diocese of Rapid City since August 2019. The diocese says it has no other allegations of sexual abuse involving Malloy. A Florida State University student is suing the school's administrators and student government officials after they failed to address retaliation against him for sharing his religious beliefs with other students. Jack Denton was removed from his position in June as president of the FSU Student Senate when screenshots of comments he made in a private chat forum for Catholic students were made public. Those comments were in support of the teachings of the Catholic Church. Joining me now on Skype is Tyson Langhofer, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom and Director of the ADF Center for Academic Freedom. ADF is representing Jack Denton in this case. Tyson, welcome. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know Jack describes himself as a devout Catholic. Can you walk us through the discussion that was taking place in the chat at the time? And what did Jack say, and why did he feel it was important to make the points that he did?
Well, another student shared a video that they encouraged other members of the group chat to watch. And he said that if you watch it, it will support certain organizations. Jack simply said that several of those organizations have anti-Catholic views. And he thought it was really important that his fellow Catholics know what they were supporting and that they might be supporting organizations that have anti-Catholic views. And he felt that that was part of the reason they have this group chat. So he simply wanted them to be aware of that before they went and watched and supported something that was anti-Catholic.
I know the screenshots were shared without Jack's permission. What happened next, and what was the reaction like on campus?
Yeah, unfortunately, that very night, the day that they were shared, the Student Senate held a vote to remove Jack as Student Senate President. And, you know, no student should feel forced to silence their deepest moral convictions simply for expressing their deepest, their views. But the reaction was really, it was pretty extreme. And they held about a 5-hour Zoom call where many, many students came and attacked Jack simply for expressing his Catholic views.
I know that you see the retaliation against Jack as a clear violation of his First Amendment rights. What did FSU cite as the reasons for removing Jack from his position? And what do you make of that?
Well, all of the reasons cited by every one of the people that voted to remove Jack was because of his speech. There was nothing else cited. Jack had great standing there in the Senate. In fact, he was elected by those same peers to be the president several months before that. And that's just a violation of the First Amendment. The First Amendment says the government cannot retaliate against somebody because of their speech, and they cannot treat somebody differently because of their religious beliefs. But that's exactly what's happened here.
And Tyson, tell me, what's life been like for Jack personally since all this happened?
Well, it's been really difficult, all of the backlash. But the wonderful thing, Jack said that the Catholic community around him has rallied around him. They've come to his support, and they've really been a great benefit to him during this time. And so it shows the value of having the Catholic Student Union and the support that he's been given. But Jack is really, he's wanting to stand for all students so that no student should feel like they have to silence their deepest views and that they can hold their religious views on a public university campus. And we can disagree and yet not cancel somebody simply because you disagree with them.
Tyson, quickly, what actions would you like to see taken now?
Yeah, we're asking the court to reinstate Jack as Senate President and to purge his files of all of record of his removal because it was wrongful, it violated his constitutional rights, and frankly, it really violated the purpose of the university, which is supposed to be a marketplace of ideas.
Well, Tyson, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. Tyson Langhofer, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom and Director of the ADF Center for Academic Freedom. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Up next, the beauty of faith on today's celebration of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Today we celebrate the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary 9 months after the December 8th celebration of her Immaculate Conception as the child of Saints Joachim and Anne. Joining me now on Skype to help us explore this feast day through art is Jim Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith. Jim, welcome back. Always so good to see you. We're used to seeing paintings of the Madonna and Child, but tell us about this unique image of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Sure, Tracy. This beautiful image from the National Gallery of Art, completed around the year 1400, is the work of Andrea di Bartolo. At the time, it was common for artists to paint narrative cycles of the life of Jesus, or the life of Mary, or the life of a local or patron saint. This panel was once part of a large altarpiece with a cycle of scenes showing the birth and the childhood of Mary. And the artists make this sacred moment accessible to us by painting Mary's birth in the ordinary setting of the home of Mary's parents, St. Joachim and St. Anne.
Jim, what do we see in this beautiful painting from the National Gallery of Art?
Sure. If we begin on the right, we see the haloed figure of St. Anne. She is reclining on a bed behind a parted red curtain. And she's washing her hands with water being poured by an attendant. And then on the left side of the painting, we see St. Joachim. He's waiting patiently outside the room, and he's lost in contemplation of the mystery of this child that he's about to meet, perhaps for the first time. And then we move to the center of the scene. We see the newborn Mary being held up by one of the women in the foreground, while another woman dressed in blue stands at the door with a plate of food in hand. Notice that this woman is looking directly at us, as if to invite us into the scene. We too are invited to celebrate this joyful moment of the birth of Mary.
What's the takeaway for today's feast day, and what should the faithful keep in mind?
You know, the church celebrates the birth of Mary because Mary is the one who is full of grace. She's preserved from the stain of original sin to bear Jesus, the Son of God, into the world. This beautiful image from 600 years ago is a visual reminder that God's great plan of salvation to send his son Jesus into the world began with the Immaculate Conception and the humble birth of the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, the Son of God, Mother of the Church, and our Mother in faith.
Well, Jem, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it. Jem Sullivan, author of The Beauty of Faith. Thank you again.
You're most welcome, Tracy.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.